Oh, but you can see. Okay.
No,
We
you're
can't
okay now.
You're okay. Yeah, we can't see it yet, but when it did work there, it worked, came up pretty easily. Yeah, so I'm just going to keep an eye on the attendee list and as people are joining, but we'll make sure we're not having any technical issues. Here we go. Okay, so I think we might begin. I think that's most people anyway who were in the waiting room entered, although other people are able to join at any time. But welcome everyone. It's lovely to have you here for this session on Lámh with the wonderful Sylvia as well. So Sylvia will be sharing her presentation shortly and getting going. But just before that, I'm just going to have a little bit of an introduction and welcome you on behalf of As I Am, also joined here by the wonderful Pauline, who is instrumental in organising this and most of our webinars really this month as well, and everything we're doing. So it's great to have her here. Pauline and I are going to be in the background, available kind of as moderators, looking at after the Q&A, anything like that, just in case anyone has any issues. But for the most part, Sylvia will be flying the plane and taking over with everyone. This is actually organised on behalf of the Adult Support and Wellbeing Programme at As I Am, which is a programme that I'm the officer of and essentially, I suppose, take care of where possible. And Pauline's been instrumental in keeping that afloat for the whole time. But just in case you don't know what the programme does, or maybe this is the first event you've entered or decided to attend, or you came across this via social media or something, which is totally fair. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview for about 2 minutes, and then I will pass you over to the expert herself. So just as a little bit of an overview, the Adult Support and Wellbeing Programme essentially began with As I Am looking at different supports available for adults across the country around the time that the pandemic started, because I myself am autistic and I tended to experience quite a lot of isolation around that time, disruption, I suppose, as well, due to routine change, things like that. And it became apparent, I suppose, to As I Am that there just wasn't a lot of support available. So that's what we have been trying to do, I suppose, since early 2021 and building out the programme. So we run different peer support groups, activity groups, and we try to kind of make them as fun, as safe as possible, engaging environments, you know, whether they're men's support groups, women's support groups, yoga classes, art classes, drama classes, things like that, you know, and we're trying to do a mixture of in-person, online, just to let autistic adults have an opportunity to connect with one another, really. And whilst I do look after the programme, and it's an amazing privilege and I love it, it's been fantastic for me, even in the people I've met and the connections I've made. So just in case this is the first time you're engaging with As I Am, and you know, maybe this is the first time you're hearing about the Adult Support and Wellbeing Programme, feel free to contact us at adultgroups@asiam.ie. Email us a general query if you'd like, and we can let you know about groups that are available, waiting lists you can join for maybe some of the groups that are full. We try to keep things moving pretty quickly, different spaces available, anything like that if you'd like to chat and find out a bit more. So it is an absolute privilege for us to have Sylvia here on behalf of the programme to do her amazing webinar. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now and if it lets me, there we go, and hand you over to Sylvia as well. Just for anyone who's wondering, this is going to be recorded as well. We are hoping to keep this to an hour. I'm sure everyone, well, hopefully everywhere in the country, it's a gorgeous evening and everyone is having a nice evening so far. So we'll try to keep it to an hour, but hopefully we will have some questions at the end. So feel free, if any questions pop up throughout this, to use the Q&A function. There you can choose to put a question in anonymously or privately or publicly. It's entirely up to you, but we probably won't address questions when Sylvia's mid-flow or anything like that, and hopefully we'll get to a few at the end if there's time. So with that being said, Pauline and I are going to mute ourselves, dip out in the background, and keep an eye on things, and I'll hand you over to the wonderful Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank
No
you so
problem.
much, and welcome everybody. Today I'm going to talk about Lámh manual hand system, and it's an introductory session, so for you to know a little bit more about what is Lámh. So let's get started. I'm going to share the screen with you. Okay. And if there's any problems, just let me know. Again, like Jennifer said,
that's perfect there.
Yeah, it's worked.
Yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Great. Okay, so you're all very welcome. My name is Sylvia Angel. I am an education consultant. You probably hear my accent. I'm originally from Barcelona, and I've been in Ireland for many years. And again, working as an education consultant, particularly with children and teenagers. And I am also a Lámh tutor, and I'm here as a Lámh tutor to speak about communicating in the community and using Lámh to communicate. So in these information sessions, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about communication, and I want you to be more aware about the different elements of communication. I know I've been talking to people during the week. I know that some of you are here because you are interested in learning Lámh yourself, for you to be able to communicate at times where communication may be challenging, but some of you are here because you want to support somebody else communicating with Lámh. So this evening I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can support others' communications, and some ideas on how you can communicate at times when you find communication difficult. We're going to talk about AAC, augmentative and alternative communication systems. I'll briefly talk about, what they are. And then we'll talk about Lámh, what it is, how to access further information and training. And I'm also going to teach you about 15 Lámh signs just to get started, so you see Lámh in action. So let's talk about communication, because we're talking about using hand signs to support communication. So just to be clear, communication is the exchange of feelings, ideas, information between two or more people. Okay, we exchange information about anything, again, ideas or feelings, and communication is key for living a good life. It allows us to create relationships, to interact with others, and to form our identity. It also allows us to be a valued member of our community, because it's with communications that we can interact, we can participate in our communities. So when we're looking at how do we communicate in our communities, we communicate with the spoken language or written language mainly. And think about tonight's webinar. How did you find out that we were running this webinar? Probably you got an email, again, written information, and now I am talking to you, verbal information. So in our society, we use written words and spoken words mainly to communicate, and that means that people who cannot use spoken words or written words, or have difficulties with that, that is a huge barrier for them. Even think of, for example, the deaf community. How many deaf friends have you got? When there's communication difficulties, there is a barrier. Having said that, we can communicate in so many different ways. We can communicate with body language. We can communicate with facial expressions, by pointing, by using pictures, using signs, with behavior, crying, using technology. We can communicate in so many different ways. So tonight, I want you to start thinking about that yes, we're using written words and spoken words, but if there's communication difficulties, then we need to embrace all forms of communication. Why do we communicate? We communicate for lots of different reasons. We communicate, now I'm communicating with you to exchange some information, but we might communicate to express or to tell, to say something that we need or we want, or to interact with others and build relationships, to say yes to something, to say no to something, for humor, to ask questions. We communicate for lots of reasons. And where, when, and with whom we communicate everywhere, at home with our families. We can communicate in the community, in work, in college, or we communicate basically in all those places where we have an opportunity to communicate. So I want you to start thinking about that as well, having opportunities to communicate. So as I said, we can communicate in so many different ways, not only spoken words, and we also can communicate, as you already know, using technology, or using pictures, using symbols, using our behavior. And tonight I want to introduce a different way of communicating with hand signs. Now, when we look at supporting communication or difficulties that we may have communicating, approximately 30 to 50% of autistic adults report they experience communication difficulties. Now, don't quote me on that. I'm looking at different surveys, different reports, and there's different statistics that say 30%, 50%, 80%. But it's important to acknowledge that that can happen, that communication difficulties can range from mild to severe, may include delayed language development, or some people not being able to use spoken words, or difficulty initiating and maintaining conversations, and difficulty understanding nonverbal cues. So when we talk about communication difficulties, again, it's a vast I suppose, a vast range, okay, from mild to severe. Factors contributing to communication difficulties can be maybe sensory processing difficulties, executive functioning challenge, like being able to organize ideas and to express those ideas, and big emotions such as maybe, at a time feeling very anxious and not being able, again, to organize thoughts and being able to communicate effectively. So it's important to understand that as much as possible, we want to create an environment where there is what we call total communication and a total communication approach, as it's understanding that each one of us has the right to communicate using the best method for us. Some people speak about non-speaking days, or may experience non-speaking days. Now, when I mean non-speaking days, it's not that particular day that you, for whatever reason it is, like you might find harder to communicate. It can be in certain situations. For example, at the moment, one of my students is finding difficulties to communicate when she's out and about. And in that case, the family have decided to introduce Lámh signs because it helps in those situations. So non-speaking days, again, like it's not necessarily a day, it can be a moment, it can be a situation, an environment, and that refers to periods of times or situations when an individual may have difficulties speaking or communicating verbally. Factors that might contribute to non-speaking days, or again, situations where the person finds difficult to communicate, might include anxiety, stress, sensory overload, or a need for increased regulation or processing time. In those situations, it's important to know that people can use alternative forms of communications, such as assistive technology, or nonverbal communication, like Lámh, during these periods of time. So let's look at how can we offer support, or if you're interested in, if you're here to explore different, I suppose, options for yourself, how can you communicate in those moments where you are finding difficulties with that. So we're going to look at different options that we have. So we can communicate by using what's called augmentative or alternative communication supports. And as the word says, These supports can either augment sometimes people that may be able to communicate with some words, but using a support that may be able to communicate about more things, or be able to use communicate more ideas or make sentences if they are using those communication systems that I'm going to talk about in a moment. Or these systems can support as well people who are not non-speaking to communicate. These are tools that can support people, and again, that you may consider yourself. Let me give you some examples. We have different type of systems. We have what we call unaided systems. And unaided systems are those systems where we don't need anything with us. In that case, it's going to be systems that involve just using our hands, our body. Or we can look at systems that are called aided systems because they involve an aid, a support, like a book or an iPad or a device. Let's look at some examples. Examples of aided systems. You may consider communication by using an external assistance, aid, or device. For example, you may consider communication with objects, like, for example, in some of my students would give me a glass, an empty cup when they are thirsty, objects of reference, or give the car keys, meaning like I want to go for a spin, or photographs, like if you're using your phone, maybe, in a particular situation when you want to communicate with something, you might actually find a picture or be able to write some text. As you know, some people communicate with pegs, with boards, devices, tablets, laptops, and these days there's kind of very specialized applications. So these are aided systems, or we can communicate with what's called unaided systems. Unaided systems, as I said, they don't require aids or devices to communicate. They just require, your body, your face, your hands, like pointing or gesturing, or Lámh. We're going to talk about Lámh today. Makaton is the equivalent to Lámh in the UK, or Irish Sign Language. So these are different options. These are all, as I call them, different tools you have to communicate, and you can select what's best with you. Or if you're here to support the communication with a family member or a friend or a colleague, again, it's trying to support people find what communication system is best for them. They all have advantages and disadvantages. Communicating with a device, for example, they can be very effective because you can communicate with anybody. People will easily understand the meaning of symbols, obviously the meaning of pictures, but the disadvantage is that you are always carrying something with you, or sometimes the device is charging and you don't have it with you. The advantage of using an unaided system is that you don't need anything with you. It's always with you because you're communicating with your hands. But the main disadvantage of unaided systems like Lámh or Makaton or Irish Sign Language is that other people may not know that system. So if they don't know the meaning of signs, you won't be able to communicate with them. Now, having said that, I've been a Lámh tutor for 20 years, whereas years ago, I always saw my students communicating maybe with the SNA or with mom and dad, and their circle was very small because people didn't know Lámh. The Lámh family, as I call it, it keeps growing. So there's a lot of people out in the community, more and more people interested in Lámh and learning Lámh. So it means that Lámh users can be understood in lots more different environments because Lámh is more accessible to people these days. Now, practical tips for general communication. And in this case, I'm thinking if you are here, if you're thinking of supporting a family member or a friend who has difficulties communicating. So there's a few things that I want you to take into considerations. When you're communicating, think about what you're saying and can you make it easier to understand? Break it down, use keywords. When you use signs, with signs, basically we're signing just for the keywords in the sentence. So we simplify the message for people. We might say the whole sentence, but just sign for 1 or 2 words. That means that the message is generally easier to understand and it's easier to process that information. So think about your saying and simplify it a little bit. If you're communicating with written information, again, think about, is it accessible and in simple language for the person that I'm trying to communicate? And look as well at the environment where you are communicating. Sometimes we are trying to communicate with people in an environment that may not be appropriate. Like maybe it's very busy, maybe it's very noisy, so that there's going to be challenges there. So again, think of how you are communicating and where you are communicating, because if you make simple adaptations, that can make communication more effective. More tips to support others that are having difficulties communicating. Make sure that when you communicate, you have the person attentions first before you communicate, before you speak. Specifically, use direct instructions to the person, match your language to the person's actual comprehension and processing level. And as we said, that sometimes in different environments, that may vary. In a situation where the person can be maybe overwhelmed and anxious, you may need to simplify the language, as opposite as another situation where the person is not having difficulties conversating. Avoid long strings of verbal information, avoid abstract language and idioms. Give the person time to process the information as well before you expect the person to respond. Sometimes when we're giving an instruction and the person is not responding to that, we might be too quick at jumping in and keep repeating the instruction. But if the person is trying to process what you just said, if you keep repeating, you're interrupting that thought process. So it's important to communicate and then just stop and give some time for the person to process what you just said. And if possible, use visual input as well to support comprehension of language. But most importantly, encourage interaction and communication in the environments in which the person actually communicates. What does that mean? Is provide opportunities. If you are here to support somebody else communicate, it's all about opportunities. Are you offering enough opportunities to communicate throughout the days and to practice communication? Here we are talking about Lámh signs. So if you have intention of introducing Lámh signs, so it's very much about learning the signs, but also giving people then the opportunities for them to initiate communication with signs. So having the opportunities is very important. Now, if you're here yourself interested in or exploring the option maybe of using Lámh at a times where communication might be difficult for you. So here there are some practical tips, my suggestions to you. First of all, advocate for yourself. It's important to know that it's okay to, if you're overwhelmed, if you didn't understand, if you need a little bit of time to, process what's being said, it's okay to ask people to maybe that you need a break, that you need some time, that you need a clarification. Can you say that again? It's okay to advocate for yourself. The other day I was at a meeting and one of my colleagues is autistic. We were discussing something and then she said, wait a minute, do you mind, can you put this in writing so I can read it, I can think about it, and then I'll get back to you. And that is totally fine. And I really appreciated as well the fact that she let me know what worked best for her. So that was a better outcome for everyone. It's important that you identify your preferred methods of communication. I'm thinking of one of my students, as I mentioned earlier on, that the family have noticed that when they are out and about, she's finding very difficult to articulate words, so that they've decided to use Lámh when they are not at home. So it's identifying what works well, so then you can actually use that preferred method and maybe let other people know so people can support you communicating that way. identify situations when it's harder for you to communicate, and use nonverbal communication, written words, visual aids, hand signs, gestures at times where maybe verbal communication is challenging. And obviously when when situations that you may need support, so seek support from trusted friends and family that might help you communicate. Now let's talk about Lámh. So we're talking about supporting communication. So today I want to give you a new tool to communicate. I don't know how familiar you are with Lámh hand signs. So first of all, so let's talk about what is Lámh. So Lámh is a sign system involving speech. Yes, we're going to use signs, but we also use the words with the signs. Lámh initially, 40 years ago, was designed for and by people with intellectual disabilities and communication needs in Ireland. And at the time, different people were using different systems to communicate. Some people were using Irish Sign Language. Some people had been working in the UK and they were using British Sign Language or Makaton. And then people saw the need for developing a system that for everybody in Ireland to use, so we would have a common system. And Lámh is different from Irish Sign Language. I have to say that probably about 50% of Lámh signs are Irish Sign Language signs, but however, the way we use, the way we communicate with signs is different. The main difference is that Irish Sign Language is a language like French, Italian, Spanish, English. It's a language with its own grammar, its own culture, it's ever evolving. Whereas Lámh is not a sign language, it's a sign system. We support spoken words with Lámh signs. And I also want to mention that we're using Lámh in Ireland, and we are using Lámh with different languages. There's people from lots of different countries and lots of different cultures in Ireland, so we can communicate with different languages, but we're all using Lámh. Benefits of using Lámh signs. So one of the benefits is that it reduces frustration. It reduces frustration for the person that is trying to communicate. So rather than other people having to guess what you are trying to say, you can immediately do a sign and the other person can, understand the meaning of that quickly. So it reduces frustration for the person communicating, but also for the communicative partner. They can respond to that. There's more successful communication, more effective communication. Another benefit of using Lámh signs is that communication partners slow their rate of speech. When people are using Lámh, immediately when you're using signs as you are speaking, you have to slow down a little bit. Let me give you an example. When I work with schools very often, especially mainstream schools, teachers can speak very fast and use a lot of language in the classroom, which can be difficult for some students to be able to understand, especially strings of instructions. So that when people use Lámh, immediately they simplify language, and rather than saying, come on everybody, tidy up, it's time to go home now, they may use a couple of times, come on everybody, tidy up, it's time to go home. So the person can zoom into those two signs, those two concepts. I got it, I know what's going on now. But people, again, teachers or people communicating with Lámh will slow down a little bit when using signs. Another advantage of using Lámh is that you always have it with you. That's, I suppose, an advantage. And people need to use whatever communication system is more suitable to them. But again, I suppose, I'm thinking some of my students, even if they are communicating with a device, or the little kids are communicating with textbooks, sometimes I introduce a number of Lámh signs so they can communicate when the device or when the textbook is not available. Maybe just communicate basic things like toilet or drink or eat or mommy or home, or because with Lámh, again, you always have it with you. You can't lose it. You're using your hands. Signing uses abilities, being able to say the words, to produce a speech, or again, under certain circumstances, being overwhelmed, being stressed, or being, again, in a situation where, you can't organize your thoughts to be able to say what you want to say. But you may be able to use your hands. So Lámh uses abilities. You can communicate with your hands. So what's important here is, can I actually communicate what I need to communicate? I may not be able to say the words, but the important thing here is, but can I communicate? Can I communicate that I'm thirsty? I may not be able to say, I need a drink now, but can I communicate it in another way? So signing uses abilities. Signing takes away the pressure for speech. And sometimes, I suppose I'm making a little bit more reference to children or teenagers that again, like I'm thinking of actually some of my students that have difficulties articulating words, and sometimes they feel the pressure for speech, for saying the words. So when we are using the signs, we take away the pressure for speech. And again, we're focusing on communication. Can we actually communicate the message? And another benefit of using Lámh signs is that it enhances the feelings of well-being and belonging. I can communicate with others. I can interact with others. If there's something that I need or want, I can let others know. I can share how I'm feeling. So overall, it enhances the feeling of well-being and belonging of people. So who is using Lámh and where? Who's using Lámh and where at the moment? So people are using Lámh everywhere. People are using Lámh everywhere. As I mentioned to you earlier on, I've been a Lámh tutor for many years. So whereas traditionally it was more families using Lámh signs, especially parents introducing signs to their children to be able to communicate. Very often we got the SNAs involved, but now this is changing, and Lámh is very much out there in the communities. A lot of schools, a lot of workplaces, workshops, residential centers, but more out there in the community. Recently, in one of my Lámh courses, there was a hotel manager. She heard about Lámh and she was curious and she wanted to know a little bit more about that. I was recently working with the Sport Ireland, and there was the staff in the Sport Ireland. They are supporting a lot of people who are using Lámh, and they feel that they always have to go communicate through a family member or a teacher or an SNA. And they wanted to communicate directly. So more and more people are using Lámh, and ideally Lámh should be used everywhere. And I suppose I'm here today talking to you about that. The more and more people that become aware of Lámh, what it is, and familiar with a few signs, the more that we are expanding or that we are increasing opportunities for people to communicate with Lámh anywhere in the community. A little bit about the Lámh organization. So the Lámh organization is in charge of developing, promoting, and maintaining the use of Lámh in the community. It's a relatively small organization. You would be surprised to hear that it only has 4 paid staff members, but there is a board of directors, and there's also, I suppose, many tutors like myself who collaborate with Lámh in lots of different projects. So although it is a small organization, I would say the Lámh family is big, with over 200 tutors all over the country collaborating. So in a minute, I'm going to talk a little bit more about where you can find more information about Lámh, the Lámh website, where can you find us on social media, and a few resources that are available for you. All communication systems, including Lámh, are more effective when everyone in a child or in an adult's world engages. For example, we want to get families involved, parents, siblings, care staff, neighbors, bus drivers, clinicians, teachers and SNAs, extended family, coaches and trainers, club leaders, peers and friends, and maybe you too. So if you want to be also being able to communicate with people who use Lámh, or again, you might be interested in learning Lámh for yourself and being able to communicate at times when it's difficult, so that maybe I can teach you a few Lámh signs right now. Okay, are you ready? Are you ready? Before I do that, I'm going to go over a few signing rules. To use Lámh signs, we need to remember some rules for signing. Okay, so the first rule is we always speak with the sign. That's another difference between Lámh and Irish Sign Language. With Lámh, we're always saying the words with the signs. You're going to use your dominant hand. If you're right-handed, you use your right hand to sign. If you're left-handed, use your left. Some signs involve using the two hands together. So then your dominant hand is the hand that moves. Make sure your hands are empty when you're signing. This is very important. If you're holding something in your hand and you're trying to sign, it's not going to be very clear. So hands empty, and then you sign. You're going to sign. You're going to make the signs in your signing space. The signing space is, imagine that there's a frame in front of your body. So you're signing naturally in front of your chest, near your face, and very important, don't cover your mouth with Lámh signs. We want people to be able to see how we articulate the words when we're using the signs. For example, the sign for drink, or the sign for eat, or the sign for mom. It's always to the side of your face, but don't cover your mouth. The person needs to see you as you articulate the words. Always make the sign accurately. With Lámh, there's no variations. There's no dialects. There's the Lámh signs, and again, we try to be as consistent as possible so that the signs don't change, so everybody can understand. And if it's somebody who's using Lámh, they are going to see the same signs in the school, at home, out in the community. So there's no variations. We try to sign as accurately as possible. Another rule for signing: face the person. Obviously, if you're not facing them, you're not going to see them. Just face the person, not necessarily obviously eye contact, but just face the person. They can see your hands. And if possible as well, it's use appropriate facial expressions to emphasize what the sign means. If you're happy, if you're crying, if you're angry, facial expressions with the signs. Okay, and now I'm going to teach you about 15 signs. What about that? Will we try that? 14 signs. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Now, I cannot see you. Okay, we're doing this in a webinar format, so I cannot see your face, but I'm just, you can sign along with me. Okay, so let's see. Let's practice the first sign. The first sign is the sign for hello. 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 Remember, use your dominant hand. In this case, your hand is going to be in L hand shape, and you're going to touch your forehead and out. Hello. Hello. This is a sign for hello. You can also use it for how are you? Hello. How are you? And that's a sign that we hope that everybody learns. Okay. Hello and how are you? Then we have the sign for thank you. Thank you. So your hand is in what we call L hand shape again. You touch your chin and out a little bit. Thank you. Thank you. And that's exactly the same in Irish Sign Language. Thank you. The next sign is the sign for good. Good. And again, I was thinking of situations where communication may be a little bit challenging. So even for you to let others know everything is going well, you're good. So just thumbs up. Good. Another sign, the sign for help. This is a sign for help. Help. So your non-dominant hand, I'm right-handed, so my left hand, your non-dominant hand, L hand shape, and your palm is facing up. And then your dominant hand, S hand shape, you put it on top and you bring it out a little bit like this. Help, help, help. It always comes out, whether you're saying, I need help, or do you need help? It always goes from you out, help. Then we have the sign for wait, wait, wait. So you're going to have your arms like this. It's like, imagine you have your arms folded. So one on the right on top of the left, your dominant hand on top of the other one, and you bring them down a little bit. Wait, wait, wait. Again, things might be going very fast around you, and you might need to tell people, wait, I need a minute, wait. Another sign, the sign for goodbye. Goodbye. Again, remember, use your dominant hand. Goodbye. Goodbye. This is a natural gesture, isn't it? Goodbye. Then we have the sign for home. So I'm actually going to show you the sign for home and the sign for house. The sign for home goes like this, home, home. So your hands are in G hand shape, like this. You bring them together. This is the sign for home, home. You may need to request, no, I want to go back home. This is home. And this is this is the sign for house, house. I'm showing you this one because some people find this sign a little bit tricky to do. So this is home, but you have an alternative there, house. Then we have the sign for again, again. It goes like this, again. Somebody might say something and you're like, I need you to repeat. I need you to say it again, again. So your hand is like that. That's letter U in U hand shape. Your fingers are pointing forwards and you flick twice. Again, again, flick twice. Again, again, again. Then we have the sign for no, no. Both palms are facing out. Cross your arms in front of your body and nod your head at the same time. No. It's a very definite no. 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 Great. Okay, 4 more signs. Then we have the sign for to break. Actually, this is to break or I need a break. Okay, I put it on the list thinking more, again, that somebody trying to request or I need a break. 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 So it means 2 things. Something is broken or I need a break. Break. Then we have the sign for to drink. Drink. So imagine you're holding a cup. So your hand is in C hand shape and you bring it to your face, but don't cover your mouth to the side of your face. Drink. Drink. Then we have the sign for to eat. 2 taps. Eat. Eat. This is the hand shape that I'm using. Eat. Eat. 2 more signs. The sign for car. Car. You might indicate, again, I want to go back to the car. 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 And 1 more sign. The sign for go. Go. So your dominant hand in L hand shape, fingers pointing down. Go. To go. To go. And by the way, if you say, yesterday I went or I'm going, it's all the same gesture, to go. Yeah, does that feel easy? Will we do it 1 more time? We'll go over the signs 1 more time. So the first sign was the sign for hello. Hello. Or how are you? Thank you. Thank you. The sign for good. Good. The sign for help. Help. The sign for wait. Wait. The sign for goodbye. goodbye. The sign for home, home, again, again, no, and facial expression as well, no. Break, break. To drink, drink. To eat, 2 taps, eat. Car, car, and go, go. That's good. Well done, everybody. Well done. Okay, and before we finish, I just want to guide you. I just want to show you a few resources. So if you want more information, so then that's where you can find more signs. So as I mentioned to you earlier on, so there's the Lámh office, as we call it, the Lámh Development Office. The Lámh office is based in Carlow. You can check the Lámh website, lámh.org, and there you'll find lots of information about Lámh, about courses, the different types of training available. And for any queries here you have, well, you can go to the Lámh website, lámh.org. But again, here you have the phone and the email, info@lámh.org. If you are on social media, Lámh is on all the platforms. You just look for Lámh sign, and you, again, like you'll find Lámh in all channels: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and also in TikTok now. And also I wanted to mention, I don't know if you've heard about a TV show called Dizzy Deliveries. Now, this is more a children's show, obviously, but it's a show that features Lámh signs. So again, even if you want to just see how it looks like, you know, how people communicate with Lámh, and you can pick up lots of signs as well. So Dizzy Deliveries, you will find that in the RTE player that was broadcasted in RTE Junior not so long ago, but now all the episodes are in RTE player. And again, I'm conscious it's a children's show, but that might be helpful. I suppose my main advice would be to follow Lámh on Instagram. It's the most active account, and you will find lots of signs there, and lots of what we call seasonal signs. So there was lots of signs for Easter. Now there's going to be lots of signs for the summer. So you'll find lots of information there. And also I have some information on my website. My name is Sylvia Angel. I'm Sylvia Angel Education, sylviaangel.com. I have a YouTube channel as well, and you can find lots of Lámh signs, videos of signs on my YouTube channel. You go to YouTube and you type in Lámh, my videos will appear. Again, I have lots of videos for children, but then again, lots of videos of single signs, so you can pick up lots of signs there. And for training, you can either, again, look at my website, sylviaangel.com. I have some courses available, or lámh.org as well. Like Lámh organizes lots of training, and all the Lámh tutors will advertise their courses on the Lámh website as well. Okay, so I don't know if you have any questions. Let me know. Okay, let me stop sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, definitely would just direct anyone who has any questions to maybe pop them in the Q&A function, and we can let Sylvia know. But I know personally, I found that really fascinating. I probably didn't realize how little I knew about Lámh and how much there was to know, but it was really interesting. I think what really I realized I didn't actually understand the difference between Lámh and Irish Sign Language, and the versus like a sign language versus a sign system. So I found that really, really fascinating. It was definitely interesting, and definitely I think the demonstrations of it makes it more real, probably. And I think I didn't even realize how much movement is involved in every single sign, probably because I'm used to seeing signs, you know, done in probably in my head in a very fast speed, all together, very scary, like a succinct system, you know, that I get overwhelmed. Whereas actually when you break it down, it was really nice to see, you could see the logic behind every sign, which was really, really cool. So I found that, I mean, I think that was incredibly comprehensive really as well. So I'm not sure if we do have any questions, but I don't think we
and I hope that it, as you say, Jennifer, we are used to seeing Irish Sign Language on television, so that's you know, people initially may think that it's going to be something that it's very difficult or daunting, but actually Lámh is relatively easy, and you could see that a lot of signs were almost like common sense, like eat and drink and car, wait. So I hope that that more people felt like you. That's not too bad.
No, it definitely helped. It took a level of kind of fear away as well, because also I didn't even realize, you know, the idea of with Lámh that it's coupled with speech, and probably how much my tendency was to cover my mouth when I was doing things as well. So it's kind of nice to see that. We have a question just come in there, Sylvia, that's somebody asking, they said, thank you for your presentation. And do you do workshops in schools for staff?
Actually, yes. And I'm thinking for even when we do Lámh online, we teach Lámh or face-to-face. We teach Lámh in very small groups because we want everybody to learn Lámh. So there's no test, there's no exam. It's very small groups. Online, only 6 people. Face-to-face, only 12 people. And the tutor makes sure that everybody learns the signs, and we support everybody. So yeah, for schools and any groups, again, 5-6 people, they can get in touch either with Lámh. I'm a Lámh tutor as well. You can get in touch with me, and we can easily organize groups for courses for groups. Yeah.
Yes, that's interesting. Someone has asked actually if you could demonstrate the sign for again.
Yes. So the sign for again. So my hand is like this. Just use 2 fingers, and your other fingers are tucked in like that. So that's called U hand shape. And then your fingers are pointing forwards, just to the side of your body. Your fingers are pointing forwards, and you flick twice. Again, again. Okay, again.
Okay.
I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yes. And do you mind if I ask you a question, Sylvia? Sorry.
Yes.
You know, when you have, like, for example, when you're holding up that sign and kind of you called it a U shape, is there, when you're starting to learn Lámh, would you start with like an alphabet of sorts? Is that kind of how people start?
Yes, actually, yeah. And as part of, I suppose, so I'll just mention a couple of trainings. There is what we call the Little Lámh workshop, and it's a 2 hours workshop where we focus on learning the first 26 signs. So that's a good introduction to people. Sometimes some people just want a little taster. Let me see if this works for me, rather than doing the full training. So that is one option. And then we have amongst lots of other training, the training that most people do is Lámh module 1. That is basically a 1-day training. We do start with the alphabet. People don't have to learn the alphabet, you know, on that day, but it's in the book, because that's very important. We want people to be very precise as their sign. So it is important to know the alphabet. So then you're going to be a very accurate signer. I also wanted to mention that lots of libraries, especially in Dublin and Kildare, are running Lámh training in the libraries. So I know that they only advertise to their own, obviously, community. So just for people that you can check with your local library, because a lot of libraries are offering Lámh training at the moment. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. We have another question come in there. Do you have much experience, I suppose, of people who are, you know, signing to, I suppose, when you're signing as a form of helping you when you're overwhelmed? Like, for example, sometimes I get overwhelmed and I kind of feel like I just lose track of my words, or I'm very jarbled and things, and I can kind of go all over the place. And do you have much experience with adults who are trying to sign to other people who maybe don't have that much experience with sign? Because even, you know, a lot of what you showed us there, even those 14 words, like you said, they're quite common sense, really. That they would, I can imagine they would help supplement a conversation, you know, especially if you're struggling. But is that kind of, is it difficult, I suppose, if you have people who aren't super familiar with sign?
Yeah. Well, most of my experience, again, it's with children and teenagers. A lot of, I suppose, a lot of the kids that I'm working with, they may be able to speak, or initially they were using Lámh and then they develop a speech and people gradually drop the signs. That is okay. But I'm always, depending on the child, but for some kids, I do suggest people to keep some signs for those situations. And sometimes in the classroom, it can be very busy. There can be a lot going on, or the child might be overwhelmed. And in those moments, again, you go back to that tool, to using Lámh. Yeah, otherwise the child, then again, I can't communicate with words, I need to communicate with behavior. So at least you're giving them a tool that it's going to be less, you know, more effective and less stressful for everyone. I suppose more and more people know about Lámh and use Lámh, whereas years ago it was mainly children with developmental delay, children with Down syndrome. They were using Lámh. About 8 to 10 years ago, then there was a lot of people working with autistic children saying, we're using signs and it's working well. It always depends on the person, of course. But again, like the more people, or we have nurses coming in and doing the training and saying they're introducing signs with people who had a stroke and they haven't recovered the speech yet, and they use that in the meantime. So yeah, I suppose it's for all of you to explore, okay, can this be helpful to me in certain situations? And some Lámh signs that you say they were common sense, so other people wouldn't understand you. Yeah,
that's actually fascinating, because I know, speaking from personal experience, sometimes it can even be just a case of, like, I found, oddly, the one that I found most helpful was the idea of learning to say wait. Because sometimes it is a case where it feels like everything around me is moving really fast and you need things to slow down. And I was even thinking, once you were showing it, I was like, even if I was to show that to my parents and that was all they learned, it would be incredibly helpful, you know, just to be able to have that ability to communicate non-verbally and things in those moments. So that is really, really brilliant.
And I'm thinking for other people to like, I'm thinking of a particular study that was done with autistic kids. So then when teachers were communicating with signs, children were 4 times more likely to follow the instructions. So you also simplify that for the person that is trying to process everything that is you know, going on. And then again, you're simplifying, everybody tidy up, but maybe you didn't, you know, the sentence was too much, too fast to, and they can focus on the sign.
That's actually, yeah, it is probably for all of us maybe who kind of experience that state of overwhelm, regardless of the reason, just to maybe reflect on how we could implement it into our own lives. We have another question there. Someone is just asking, is the Lámh alphabet similar to the Irish Sign Language alphabet, or is there quite a lot of difference there?
It's actually the Lámh alphabet is the Irish Sign Language alphabet. So the alphabet is the same. Lámh is based on the 600 signs. Actually, Lámh has 600 signs. I'd say that about 50% of those signs are Irish Sign Language signs, and the other 50% more natural gesture, like all gone, or again, the eat and the drink, or this. So the alphabet is the Irish Sign Language alphabet.
Okay, that's actually, yeah, that's probably actually really good to know, because I know certain places, like I think my local library does training on both, and I was wondering what would be the difference there. So that's actually really fascinating. So I don't think we have any more questions. We do have lovely feedback and someone who said that they found it fascinating and that they felt quite compelled to learn it because you made it easy to understand. And I personally absolutely have to agree. It took a lot of the fear out of it for me. In particular, Pauline, do you want to come in there, or how did you find it?
Just to say, Sylvia, thanks. It was fascinating. I was completely engaged in it, and I keep saying to myself, I want to learn a new language, and maybe it will be Lámh now as opposed to a verbal language. And I think it's important. I think there were some lovely tips in it as well, actually, just around how being able to self-advocate and speak to your needs on non-verbal days as autistic people. Certainly that I took away from it, and I'm certainly putting through, you know, I'm even doing documentation now on non-verbal communication, and even from an organizational perspective, I think it would be really important for organizations even to adopt this on some levels for staff and employees who are autistic, who are just overwhelmed. And like Jennifer said, you can do the weight signs, or, you know, I certainly find when I've had days of speaking and speaking and speaking, I will retreat and be nonverbal myself as much as I can talk and I'm articulate. There's days I have to say to everybody in my house, I can't speak today and don't talk to me. And I might get you to teach it to my husband and my son sometimes. Bring you in, you can teach them.
Yeah.
You can teach them to be quiet. But yeah, no, I thought it was fascinating, and I think it's just the pure beauty and simplicity of it, because it is very literal. And I love that beauty of it as an autistic person. So no, I thought it was brilliant, and thanks for agreeing to do it. And the wonderful feedback coming in. Yeah, thanks. It was brilliant.
Lovely.
Thank you.
And I'd like to say as well that the Lámh office, and I suppose like all the Lámh tutors, we are very welcome. We want to hear from you, from the point of view that, again, Lámh initially was developed for people with intellectual disabilities, with communication needs, and there's more and more people that are using Lámh in different ways for different reasons. So we want to hear about that, because as the more we learn about how are people using it, the more Lámh can develop specific programs and a specific training for different groups of people. So always feel free to pop an email to the Lámh office, sharing your experience.
That's really nice to hear, that it's kind of, you know, hopefully an ongoing conversation, because it'll be interesting to even see where Lámh is in 10 years time. You know, again, it'll be interesting to see, but definitely, you know, on behalf of everyone here and the adult autistic community in general, or anyone who's here for any reason, really, thank you so much, Sylvia. That was incredible.
Thanks, Sylvia.
It was really, really lovely. I will be following up with everyone who was on the registration list tomorrow with the recording. So just it usually takes some time overnight for the recording to upload to the cloud, but other than that, I will be following up with everyone. So just in case anyone wants to look back at anything or anything like that. But definitely on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, Sylvia. That was brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you soon. Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone else. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.